Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're all doing good and well. So now it's time for me to discuss my thoughts on episode 5 of the Amazon Wheel of Time TV series. This episode was called Blood Calls Blood, which incidentally is the heading of chapter 7 in the Great Hunt book, if you're interested. Although the events that unfold here bear very little resemblance to the events that unfold in that chapter. I'm pleased to report though that this episode I really quite enjoyed, even though it was slightly slower pacing. For me, each episode since the second one has each had its kind of respective strengths, and I've taken something good from each episode. From episode 2, I enjoyed the action sequences and the beginnings, sort of seeing some really good character development. Episode 3, I enjoyed the story that we were presented with and the introduction of that Dana character. Even though it was a one-off, I thought it was a really good and exciting entry into the series. Episode 4, the previous episode, I liked as a whole, and how there was some focus on Logain and the sort of giving us an idea of the Wheel of Time world a little bit more, for particularly if you're new viewers. What has been very apparent, though, has been some really quite big divergences from the Eye of the World books. In particular, the last 2 episodes have shown a very different direction to the first book. To recap, I wasn't impressed with the first. I left out the first episode there on purpose. I wasn't so impressed with the first episode. I had very mixed feelings about that one, just to be honest. But it still had its merits, but it felt a bit too rushed for an opening episode, particularly if you are new to the Wheel of Time. But as I say, every episode since then, including episode 5, the one I've just seen, has been pretty good. So, to sort of summarise and recap this episode, so to begin with, we see the Aes Sedai, Moiraine, Lan and Nynaeve arrive at Tar Valon following the events which happened in the Dragon Reborn episode. We also, about the same time, see Rand and Mat approaching Tar Valon from a distance. So that's an interesting deviation from the books. I'll talk about deviations from the books a bit later. Then Nynaeve and Moiraine, when they're in Tar Valon in the White Tower, have a little confrontation, which shows the tension there between those two characters. Nynaeve being very protective of her, her friends in the story, whereas Moiraine is trying to drive forwards her mission. And I like the way she defends herself actually in this scene. I think it's again pretty well acted and a good scene in the episode. We see the White Cloaks capture Egwene and Perrin as well. And Aemon Valder here is very much the head of things. Very well portrayed, I think, by Abdul Salis here. We switch to Rand, I think, later on, and he actually meets Loyal in Tar Valon. Again, that's another difference from the books, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But I was impressed with the portrayal of Loyal by Hamid Animashorn, I think I've got his name pronounced right, and really thought that given Loyal is such a lovable character in the series, I was pleased to see it feel like he could be done some justice here. Just for an introduction, I was impressed with the way that Hamid portrayed him. There's an interesting torture scene, which when we switch back to Egwene and Perrin, we see Perrin in this kind of in this trap being gradually kind of cut open in a pretty brutal way by Child Valder, whilst Egwene is watching seemingly helplessly. And she tries to touch the source. She doesn't quite manage to have any impact with that, but Perrin is turning in, showing his wolf powers coming through, and they both later on they manage to escape. Again, some divergences from the books in the way this unfolds, and different characters involved really, because in the books we have Jeffrey Bornold and Child Bayer very much at the centre of what's happening here, as opposed to what happens in this TV episode. Some more tension building with Moiraine and Liandrin, and it has been a focus in these last 2 episodes on Aes Sedai culture, I think, and their whole society, and the events that are unfolding seem to be suggesting to us as viewers that the Aes Sedai are a very central part of, or at least a central part of, this season of television. They are kind of, apart from Moiraine, they are certainly not given as much time in the Eye of the World book. I think they get a lot more time in the second book, in the Great Hunt, in the series of books. Now, there's also a lot of focus, given this is the aftermath of the big events that happened in episode 4, there's a big focus on the grief that Stepan is experiencing, having lost his Aes Sedai, and what happens at the end is a kind of like a funeral of sorts, with a really big outpouring of grief. We see Lan really, because Stepan, spoiler alert, commits suicide. The end of this episode is really kind of a sad and painful depiction of how the characters kind of around those events are feeling, you know, and it obviously shows how difficult it is for a warder to cope after losing his Aes Sedai. And I liked that, actually. I thought that was all done pretty well, even though it was pretty slow paced. I didn't see this was doing the series any harm as such. Now, what I do wonder about is the events. I can't help but wonder how much of the Eye of the World at this point seems to have been left out, and whether we're going to see any of the events that happen near the end of the Eye of the World, really, because it seems like Camelin isn't going to be featured here at all now that Rand and Mat have reunited with Nynaeve, and it seems like they'll probably reunite with Moiraine, Lan, etc. as well. So given that, it makes me wonder whether chapters like the Dark Along the Ways and even Faldara in the events of the Eye of the World may also be missed, as well as the events that have been missed in Camelin. The lack of us being introduced to characters like Elada, Elaine, her brother Gawain, obviously Queen Morghese, and some fairly key events there, I think, as well, to sort of be to miss out. But I think there is still obviously the possibility they can make it work some other way, but I would admit to disappointment if we don't see some really exciting stuff that we see at the end of the Eye of the World with, I think, the likes of Baalsmon. The Ways journey is, for me, one of the highlights of the first book, and I would have loved to have seen a depiction or representation of what the Ways would look like in the TV series. So I hope we still get to see that in some form or other, because it is, for me, a fantastic moment in the first book, and I hope we don't see that get left out. Particularly now we've got Loyal in the mix, maybe they'll bring it in just in a slightly different way than what we've seen so far. As I say, there's a big focus on Aes Sedai politics and culture already, which suggests they're bringing forward lots of what may happen in the Great Hunt into this TV series, perhaps slightly earlier than we may have otherwise been expecting. So I think that's all I wanted to say about episode 5, kind of giving a quick summary of the episode, and then also noting the things which seem to have been missed from the books, and which I still hope do happen at some point. But I think Camelin probably now is dead and buried. I'm not sure we're going to see Camelin at all, given that everything has kind of now shifted to Tarvalon. But who knows what they'll do next now. This is, if anything, an unpredictable TV series, but it's still been quite a good one so far. Thanks all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Do feel free to like and subscribe. As always, if you like this kind of sci-fi, fantasy and horror coverage that I do, as well as a lot of music related videos on the channel, album reviews and ranking lists, all that kind of thing. If any of that is your sort of thing, do click on like, subscribe. Otherwise, take care everybody. Enjoy what's left of your weekends. See you later.